Yeah, I think next time we will take 2 kilos of weight.
How much did you have?
Right now we don't have any.
I think, first of all, I think this area is safe. I saw a trap laid out, and then I saw some nets entangled. And there's not a lot of fish here. But the cooperation was good. The depth is kind of deep for all of us to get comfortable in. But at least we all got the methods right, so it's a good thing that happened.
The sea arching.
Yeah.
Then it look like there's a lot of those sea arching we need to check maybe because we didn't do the sea arching assessment, but when you go and do the coral, you can observe a lot of sea arching nearby coral. So I think maybe next time if we do the coral, maybe we can do the sea arching also in order to see what are the density covered for those sea arching. Yeah.
Hapo kwanza ndio nimeweka
Sasa kuna watu wamechukua slate ya kina Beni.
Slate ya nini tena?
Yes.
One, two. I did two.
Initially we said the 2 biomass and then some of the guys
Go to
changed it over.
Rudi.
For the biomass go should go and then for the
with the lake we went shallow because we wanted to talk about it. We were too shallow.
The
lake mbili. Nikamuuliza mkuu hapa akasema
Down, you know, it's like that 1.5 meter where you can't
nilipoambia akaniambia tutakununulia soda wewe.
That's right. It's easier. It's easier. You know, at 1.5 meters you can't get down, you know.
Oh, guys, organize the data.
Not team. Shabani,
Your slate.
Yeah, scuba diving is much easier. Whoever said earlier.
Muda tupate wapi shehe muda ndio
you know why it's easier?
biomass tunafanya ngapi?
Mbili mfanya moja.
And we're going with the
Mfanya mbili.
Ndio tuwaambiwa mbili.
Mimi unajua nimeangalia pale hamna samaki. Alafu
Sasa tungeambiana
unafanya
tulikubaliana
as
plan
long as you know the method. I can imagine
20
diving
minutes
yourself, you don't know to ID.
transect moja mahali kama pale hamna samaki. Nikawa na wasiwasi na
Slate yangu liweka.
ipo tu hapo.
You should somewhere.
Niliwapatia.
Haikuwa na
Practice.
You enjoyed the up and down there.
Yeah, so today we were doing training, and it was the first practice that we did, and we did fish biomass. We were estimating fish biomass and substrate cover, so looking at coral diversity as well as cover of different subcategories, sand, macroalgae, hard coral cover. Yeah, so it went well. I think people practice biomass very well. There wasn't a lot of biomass here. There isn't a lot of fish. So we'll see tomorrow. Probably we're going to get an area where they can actually practice, especially their identification, because you are barely seeing 5 families here.
So,
Yeah.
But what's like more generally, why this week is important?
It is important because WCS from different countries within the WIO are here, and some of the area where we have a long-term data, we want to continue that, and we want it to be standardized so that each country has a set of experts that can collect, especially the most important fish biomass, coral cover, and then with time they pick up other indicators. But it's more important is to make sure that that is standardized across all the WIO countries, and it's a continuity of the historical data we've been collecting.
Yeah, I know
So
that.
what is it exactly? People come from different countries today?
Yeah, we have people from the 4 countries in the WIO where there's a WCS office. So there's some people from Kenya, from Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar.
Sorry, I was thinking when you said that. Can you tell me again?
Yeah, so there's people from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Madagascar, as well as Mozambique, where we have offices and they have active coral reef monitoring in those countries.
And why is it important to be all together?
Most important is to make sure that our data is standardized, it's collected in a standard way, and it's comparable. We can compare by country and continue the long-term data that we've been collecting for the last 30 years.
So what is it? How do you call what you're doing right now?
So this is a refresher coral reef monitoring training for all the WIO countries. Yeah.
And can you, and that's more like, that will be without your face, to explain what you did underwater. Can you tell me a bit, like if you were still there, what you've seen, or what you would ask?
Yeah, so what we did a belt transect for fish biomass, and this we look at different families. We have a set of about 20 families that we look at, and we do counting. So we count the number of individuals in each family, and then categorize them in different size classes. And based on those classes, we can estimate fish biomass based on non-length weight relationships. Yeah, and then for substrate we are using line intercept transect, where you lay a transect at the bottom at the substrate, and then measure each categories. You measure the length of each category throughout that line, and then based on that you can estimate the curve of the different categories.
Categories of?
Categories of substrate, benthic substrate. So whether it's hard coral, whether it's macroalgae, whether it's sand, whether it's the different genera of corals. Yeah.
Can you tell me what? I'm just repeating sometimes because I won't hear my voice. It's just hearing you. So what do we have there? What are substracts? What kind of substracts have you seen today?
Yeah. So there was a bit of the coral is there. There's a number of genera, Cynarea, which is a species of Porites. There's a massive Porites, a bit of Acropora, not many, but they were there. Of course tough algae is common in this kind of settings, and a bit of macroalgae, not much, but a bit of that. Yeah, and in terms of fish, it wasn't very good. There isn't a lot of fish. You're only seeing a few families, and most of the individuals are small. Things are even less than 20. You're not seeing anything above 20. So likely from what they've collected, fish biomasses, from just what I've seen, might be 200 kilograms per acre or less, which is quite low. Yeah, you want to see something above 500.
How do you explain that?
Sometimes when you've done over and over again, and then you just swim around a place, you can easily say that this is not anything above 100 or anything above 200. Of course, you have to check your data, but sometimes you see it. So yeah, there are areas you see we are getting, like some parks in Kenya, you are getting above 1,000. Where we'll go tomorrow, we are likely to see above 1,000 kilograms per acre. Yeah, which is it's exciting. It's good to learn because you are busy. You have to be busy throughout that period. Yeah.
Come a little bit.
Yeah.
Perfect. Look at Jean like me.
Yeah. Alright, Tim. So
My question would be something along these lines. So there's been a lot of talking about the tipping points and you know, the fact that we're going to lose all coral reefs around the world and so on.
Yeah.
And obviously we came here and we visited a few places that don't look so bad.
Yeah.
How do you sort of bring these two things together? Like one side of the world that is sort of saying that everything is falling apart, and then the fact that there are places that this is probably not the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, coral reefs are in trouble. That's I don't think that's debatable. We know coral reefs are in trouble. Whether they're going to disappear or not, that's the debate. And what does disappearance mean? Does it mean going to no coral reefs, or 10%, 20%, 30%? How much coral reefs are going to survive? Well, I believe that corals will survive the coming climate age. I believe there are certain areas that will do much better than other areas. I believe that as much as 30% of the reefs could do pretty well in the coming era. So I don't believe that all reefs will disappear. And my evidence for that is that reefs have existed for a very long time. They've been through a lot of changes. Humans are just one of the many changes they've faced. 10,000 years ago, when the glaciers melt, sea level rose 100 meters. That changed them considerably. So I think that's true, and I also think, because I've spent a lot of time looking at reefs, I've seen a lot of damaged reefs over my life, but I've also seen reefs recovering. I've seen reefs that have avoided change. I've seen reefs that have resisted. So all the avoidance, recovery, and resistance aspects of ecological systems I've seen in different areas. And I know if you have a favorite reef that you go to and it's not doing well, you may feel that that's the case everywhere, but that's not the case everywhere. Reefs are broadly distributed throughout the tropics and even into temperate areas. They're all going to experience climate change a little bit differently. And that's what I see, because I move around and look at all the different types of reefs, environments in which they exist in, the way that humans manage them. And I believe human management is really important, management of fisheries. That's something that doesn't really get discussed compared to the climate change issue. But we have large-scale human resource extraction in fisheries in general, where resource extraction is modest or minimal. Reefs do better in those conditions. But when you combine climate change and unrestricted human access to reefs, those are often the reefs that are in the poorest condition. And so it's often hard to separate the effects of the local from the global. And there's a tendency from people that believe all problems are global to explain most of the changes they see from that global perspective. And there's a tendency from people that are mostly working local and seen locally to use that as an explanation. But the reality is these things are blending. The forces or threats to reefs are blending, and anytime you look at a reef, it's a complex system that's adapting to all of those different forms of disturbance. And my feeling is that they are responses to disturbances, and that I tend to believe that reefs are, like many living things and ecological systems, they reorganize in unique ways depending on the kind of disturbances that are there. There is no single coral, which seems to be kind of the assumption of the tipping point people. There are many species of coral. Each of them survives in its own unique way. Some survive in low light, some in high light, some in high waves and low waves, some of them in dirty water and some of them in clean water. So there's enough life history diversity, and if we can maintain that diversity, then the resilience and the adaptation of the reefs will be intact, and whatever we throw at it, there'll be a certain amount of resistance, recovery, and avoidance of those aspects of the reef.
So, yeah.
Just talking about those, you said the other day, you talked about the species that is doing well here.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it
And what kind of science of resilience do you find in coral reefs? Like what should we be looking at?
Yeah.
See that it is-
Well, because of these life history differences, some corals do better in some conditions and in others. And under a certain condition, say before human impact was big, there was a different set of species and their different dominance within the reef, and that's been changing ever since I've been studying reefs, and it will continue to change. And there are some surprises that emerge there. Things that were never common in the past suddenly become common. And it's because they have some sort of life history that gives them the ability to survive. There's some reefs, corals that can tolerate a fair amount of sunlight and warming, and there are others that are intolerant of it. And so you need to figure what that is out if you're a scientist. But life itself is sort of figuring out that process as things change. And that's what we've been observing. And if you have a favorite coral and that one is disappearing, you may think it's the end of the world, but there are other corals that will come along and do things that are similar. They'll deposit calcium carbonate, they'll create homes for fish. And they may not do it quite the same way, and they may not do it as well, but they will compensate to some extent. And that gives me some hope that reefs will be around for much longer than some of the more dire predictions. But I have to make it clear that...
Just a second, because of these big waves coming.
Oh yeah, okay.
Do you want to talk about specific species potentially?
So which one?
Specific species of coral, because
Oh yeah.
he's gonna have footage underwater.
Sometimes I avoid that because I use Latin names, but
yeah, I know, but it's okay.
But okay,
You're a
yeah.
scientist and
Yeah.
You just don't say many, but
Yeah.
To what you told me yesterday, actually. So that's not a question, maybe.
Yeah. Did you, by the way, did you see Sineria out there? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
exactly.
Yeah. It's the one with the gray. There's a green version, lime green almost, and it kind of has a shadowy look to it. And then there's another coral that's more tan and has sort of a powdery look to it. That's Sineria or Porites rus. Those seem to be doing well, and I wouldn't have guessed that, 30 years ago. I didn't know what was going to do well.
What do you mean they seem to do well? Can you explain with the recent events?
Yeah, well, they're covering more of the reef. Before, they used to be kind of rare. If you saw one in a dive, that would be unusual. Now you dive and you see them immediately. They're there, they're right there. And if you measure how abundant they are, they're now 30 or 40% of the coral cover in some places. Not everywhere they do well, but in some places, particularly where we are right now, they're doing well. And my guess is the future is Sineria or Porites rus. They're going to continue to do okay. Their competitors are declining, so they seem to do well when their competitors are declining, and they do better under heat stress. So, but they're not everywhere. But here they're there. Some of the places I go to, they're very uncommon, and other species kind of emerge as resilient.
When you say here, you mean where?
Here at Chumbe Island in Tanzania. This is a very unique place for me. They started a marine park here in 1992, and I came in 1994. So I've been studying these reefs since 1994. I come every few years. And I've seen the kind of changes that go on, and there are changes over that, 30-some year period. And one of the changes, the biggest change in the corals, is that Porites rus is now very abundant. It was here before, but now it's common. It's the most common coral. We used to have another coral called the Acropora, and that's kind of hanging in there, but it used to be 60-80% of the cover, and now it's more like 30 or 40%, and Sineria is compensating and taking over that space. So we see those changes. We see other changes that have nothing to do with climate change. Some of them are fishing impacts. So this area was very abundant sea urchins. All over in this reef lagoon here, there were sea urchins in the area of 2,000 kilograms per hectare. And slowly we've watched them decline over the 30 years to where there are very few of them. I'm only seeing a few now.
What is the reason for that?
And that's because of the fish. The red line triggerfish, and specifically, they're now quite abundant. They love eating sea urchins, and they're doing very well here because while fishermen don't actually want to catch red line triggerfish, when they put bait in the water, they're the first fish to come and grab that bait. So they often catch them. Sometimes they throw them away, sometimes they keep them for home use. They're not on the market, you'll never see them on the market, but people do cook them at home. And so those fish are now very common, and one thing we've learned about that fish is that they grow slow. They take 15, 20 years to recover once they're gone. And so you have to close an area for 15, 20 years before you begin to see them recover and before they take on the job of eating the sea urchins. And once the sea urchins go down, then the fish that eat algae start to increase. So that's what you see here as well. There's a lot of grazing parrotfishes, grazing surgeonfishes, and they're taking over the role that the urchins used to play. The thing about those fishes is they're more useful to people to have parrotfish and surgeonfishes because they're edible. But you need to have some areas where they're protected for them to do well. If not, you have sea urchins, and the sea urchins here are not edible. So you're changing over from a non-edible to edible herbivore, and it has a big effect on the reef and has a big effect on food for people as well, and maintaining populations of species that may be threatened by heavy fishing. So the Chumbe Island's been a great place for us, and it's a rare thing. Some people say, oh, there are too many marine parks. No, there are very few marine parks that work. They're sometimes parks, but they're not functioning. This is one that functions pretty well. It has a lot of support from the people that live nearby. They see the benefits. Many people are employed here. They see the tourism increases. They know the fisheries are more stable. So they're proud to be part of this system, and it's a very small area. In fact, I would argue it's too small, but at least it's something, So we shouldn't deny these small areas of protection. They provide a lot of services to people in terms of stabilizing fisheries, in terms of increasing tourism, giving young people a place to see nature. I consider that very important, and that's ongoing here.
And why? So what you've been doing, and you will do the whole week. Why is it important?
The monitoring.
Well, a lot of what I've talked about is change, and we can't know what's changing unless we're out there evaluating and monitoring the change that's occurring. And one thing that interests us is how, even when you close an area to fishing, what's the rate of change? And that range of change tells us a lot of things. One of the things it tells me is the rate at which fish grow. While you think people may know that, they really don't know that very well. And so if I know how fast fish grow, I know what is sustainable fishing, because you have to match the capture of fish with the production or growth of fish. And that's not very well known, particularly in the tropics. Maybe they know very well a fish in Europe, an eel or other type of fish, but here in the tropics, it's not very well known how fast fish grow. And so we know kind of how fast fish grow. We know on a yearly basis now because of places like this. We know on a daily basis how fish grow. So the recommendation would be to not capture fish beyond the rate at which they grow, because that's passing the sustainability limits. And that is what's happening in most of the tropics, is that capture exceeds production. So in many cases, it's out of ignorance. We just don't know what the production is, so people take as much as they like or as much as they can. And then what we find is that eventually ends up in poverty, because they take more than the production, and eventually their incomes decline, their incomes decline to the level at which they're intolerable, and then people stop fishing. So what used to be a viable livelihood becomes no longer viable because there's just not enough production. And you would hope those fisher find other jobs, and they often do. And some places they find better jobs in tourism, like here. They get paid more to work in tourism than they get paid to fish. So a lot of people and families that used to fish are now supporting their families through tourism. So, you know, these things are slowly being figured out through these long-term measurements, not just the corals. That's a bigger climate issue, but the fish capture is a local issue. And that local issue is something that we can also address. So we're always thinking both local and global when we're monitoring. We're global by including many different sites and understanding how different sites respond to global climate change, and local sites to understand how local production of fish is occurring, and matching that with the capture of fish. So those are two of the biggest things we do. And having parks like this, they're really important because there are not many of them. And so everything we find out here is very valuable. We have a lot of information about where fishing occurs because 95% of the area is fished. And so it bothers me that sometimes people don't like the 5% of areas that are not fished, but I think we can leave 5%. I would hope we could leave 10%, 20%, why not 30%? It's not taking too much away from people, and it contributes. And the research shows that somewhere around 30% of the area close to fishing probably stabilizes fisheries and keeps them productive. There's enough evidence, I think, in my mind that a 30% goal is a good one. I don't know if we'll reach it because there's a lot of resistance, but I think we should set it as a goal. And as a conservation society, we work towards those goals.
Can you say something about, you know, the need to build the capacity of the next generation?
Yeah.
Now we are good.
I've been fortunate to work for a conservation organization, the Wildlife Conservation Society, that supported me for 35 years to do this work. And the reason they commit to long-term employment in these kind of fields is that they know that solving these problems are long-term problems. They're not solved immediately. They're not solved by yourself. They're solved as groups of people working together. They're solved by a network of people working in different locations that are sharing information and sharing outcomes. So it's a good method for engaging the communities you work with, and the communities are many. You know, we have local fishing communities, we have county government, national governments, we have marine protected area people, we have fisheries people employed in fisheries departments. We have young scientists coming out of universities that are fascinated by the marine life. All of those people are interested in the kind of work that I do, and many of them would like to do it themselves. So a good part of my time is spent training those people, making sure they're up to date on the knowledge, making sure that they get some of the skills themselves, making sure that wherever they're employed, whether it's the Wildlife Conservation Society or the National Park Service or the Fisheries Department, that they're using those skills in their jobs, that they appreciate and understand the role that, for example, protected areas play. They understand that the idea of sustainability requires information. So what we're doing is making sure that we're training those people, and I'm a late career person, so I consider it increasingly important that I pass on some of this knowledge to a younger generation. And that's part of what we're doing here. We're actually getting younger people from the region who are fascinated by marine life, who are committed to employment in that field in one way or another, and give them some of the skills to be able to do this kind of work on their own. Hopefully be able to compare it, hopefully to be able to continue the work, continue the legacy of of the environmental conservation science that we do. It's a young field. The idea of conservation is, at least in the modern form, is not an old idea. There's a lot to learn, a lot for society to learn, and scientists and committed individuals developing this understanding are the ones who are going to make sure it gets integrated into future generations. And hopefully when we turn this system around towards a better world for man and nature, we'll use that information to make sure that we get it better next time. We can do it better in the future. I think the future is going to depend more and more on natural resources, and we need to make sure we don't undermine the natural resources that we have right now. It's going to make life a lot harder for people if we don't protect what we have now for future generations. So training people I consider a core part of that. And it's something I've been doing my whole life. I consider just part of the job is always engaging with people at all levels, from people with very modest educations to those with the highest levels of education, engaging with them on whatever level of knowledge is appropriate for them, and helping them to appreciate nature. And I'm fortunate that the Wildlife Conservation Society has helped to give me stability to be able to do that pretty continuously for 35 years. And the results have been astounding. The science has moved forward quite a bit. And we're in a much better place than when I started. I'm proud to be part of that legacy of creating that knowledge. And I'm very hopeful that the young people I work with share a similar passion. Oh.
You can actually begin.
I think we talked about most stuff.
Yeah, maybe just can you re-say for under images at the start, just a quick sum up of is climate change real?
Yeah, get back to the so I was pretty excited to go out today and see the state of the reef. I haven't been here for 3 years. So, like everybody, I read the bad news. Do you want me to start over again?
No, I just have a weird
Oh.
weird sounds.
But don't you want to talk about the high core? Don't you want to say?
The
High core. High core.
High-
High integrity coral reef.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
because we are going to have it somewhere in the...
Yeah. Okay. Let me okay, I'll blend them right
It's
now.
even more for this question was even more thinking about small bits where we want, that's not about you and that we won't see you. It's more like to really like put things in perspective at first, like really like in the first images.
Overview.
So I don't think we have a soundbite that says yes, we've seen in that region that climate change has had effects, and then another sentence later, another couple of sentences just saying, but there's also things that we see recently.
Coral is really... I think I'll use the word prediction because that's kind of... So people are predicting a very bad outcome for coral reefs, and they have their reasons for that. But I was fortunate today to be out looking at a reef that I think is going to do well in the future. And what I saw today was a reef that's in much better state than most people would expect. But we predicted that based on our ecological models, our work on coral integrity. We're predicting places where reefs are going to do better. And one of the predictions is that marine parks in certain environments, like in Tanzania, are going to do better. And today I've seen evidence for that once again.
Thanks.
That looks good.
Yeah, I just don't remember, because I remember at the start you said you quickly passed to the resilience of the coral.
Yeah.
But can we just like have one sentence that will be at the start
Yeah, maybe they.
More, you know, to say.
On what? On the resilience per se?
No, but that I maybe just say.
We can try a
we've been-
bunch of different
we've
things, and you can pick the one you like. How about that?
That's
Yeah.
a good length though. That kind
It was not so bad. So many people, you know, the news often covers the dramatic events like the bleaching in 2024. They were bad. I saw very bad.
Maybe can you remind us of the events of these last year for coral reefs?
Yeah, the news for coral reefs was bad in 2024, and it remains generally bad. So there's good reasons for that. Coral reefs have suffered greatly in the last few years because of climate change, a number of factors. And what's interesting is to be able to find that there are some reefs that are doing well, and I'm at one of them today. And that's what we predicted. We predicted some of them would survive, and that's what we're seeing today. So while the news is bad and the predictions are bad, we also have predictions for areas that will survive, and we've seen that.
Thanks, perfect. Okay. That's all I needed for the.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just the audio, whenever we have like a
can
couple of
also,
ideas we want to plug in, we can do a
Yeah,
recording
yeah,
anytime.
yeah,
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I think, okay.
You cover most stuff that I
You
can
cover,
think of.
you got enough integrity on there, or what else?
We won't be able to
Yeah, cover
say
it
all
all.
those things in.
Yeah, I don't want to.
But you can also.
Too much technical, you think is bad?
Well, yeah, my professor always said you can't throw out too many words
Yeah, I
that
get
people
it.
don't understand, then they stop listening, and they just nod their heads.
Well, if it's you like this, but if you're showing, that's different.
Yeah, sure, and you will, yeah.
But
Yeah.
we won't be able to do it because for that I would need to be with you. You show me, we go out of the water, you tell me.
No, but I mean,
what
you
we
can
saw.
pick from some of the footage you have. There's gonna
Yeah.
be
No,
generic
but with
footage
what
of
you
Buru.
said right now, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It was
But
genuine.
let me just try one more. Just give me another minute here to say. We all know that predictions are not correct. That's what we have to realize. And that predictions based on your assumptions and the kind of models you use to make predictions. Some of the predictions being used today are fairly simplistic and are not encountering the reality of the complexity of life. But what we're seeing with some of the more complex predictions is some of them are coming true. That is, that corals are surviving the onslaught that they've experienced in the last couple of years. Yeah.
It's super technical. What you just see versus I, is that okay?
Yeah.
Like if he says
I-
what we are doing, is it like generic enough?
I just
Yeah.
won't either you, we or I just use
No,
wildlife
because
conservation.
we are talking now.
Oh,
What
as
is
we.
the WCS doing in East Africa for
Yeah.
coral
That's pretty
health?
Well,
It's a 2 hours question.
no, I'll do it.
No, but
Yeah,
like,
it is.
if you need to sum up everything,
Yeah.
like
Sure, the
In a
work, the
sentence you
importance
can-
of the work of WCS in conservation
Yeah.
in these regions.
Yeah. The wildlife are you taping? Okay. The Wildlife Conservation Society works in poor countries that often don't have the ability to do conservation science on their own, and they're concerned about where poverty and the biodiversity of life intersect, and that occurs in many countries like Tanzania and Kenya and Mozambique, Madagascar, where the poverty and biodiversity are main concerns of people. The WCS is doing a job to make sure that they find a better balance between reducing poverty and maintaining biodiversity.
and how do you do that
Today.
in
What
your
about-
everyday, in your
Okay.
year?
Okay.
Yeah.
In order to do that, we create a better understanding of the forces that create poverty, and at the same time we understand the forces that create biodiversity. So by understanding those forces, we can better reduce the threats to biodiversity and poverty, and hopefully provide a way out of high poverty and low biodiversity, which is what we're trying to avoid.
And what activities do you do to
So you know why this is
protect?
hard? Because he is talking as a scientist about it.
Yeah.
You know. If you ask me, for
Maybe-
example, I can tell you that we do trainings for the MPAs, that we do community livelihoods projects.